data centers need to be regulated. That is also a form of AI regulation. Sam Altman just a few weeks ago said that he envisions, just for his company, OpenAI, building out 200, sorry, I forgot the number. He envisions building out 250 gigawatts worth of data centers by 2033, which he estimates could cost $10 trillion. 250 gigawatts. A reporter actually compared this to the entire amount of energy demand in India. And so that would be an extraordinary increase in energy demand globally, and most of that would be powered by fossil fuels. I want to emphasize that this scale is actually technically unnecessary. If we didn't have that scale, we would still have AI. And yet, they are trying to build larger and larger and larger data center facilities, supercomputer facilities around the world, and have sold a narrative to the public, to policymakers, that this is required for getting more AI capabilities. There are a lot of activists, civil society organizations, and communities themselves that have taken a really big leadership role in countering this kind of expansion, which I describe in my book as a form of imperial expansion. One of the anecdotes that I highlight in my book is of these Chilean water activists that were very concerned about a proposed Google data center landing into their community. And it was a project that was sanctioned by the Chilean government. It was one that the Chilean government, in fact, celebrated because they considered it to be a mark of economic development for the country, of participating in this technological revolution. But what the community and the water activists saw on the ground was that it was taking their already scarce freshwater resources, and without their consent. They had not been notified of this project. They actually discovered it after someone tipped them off that was not supposed to tip them off. And they then pushed back aggressively on the proposal. So they started mobilizing, talking with every single one of the neighbors within that community, explaining to them in plain terms what exactly having a data center within this community could mean for their ability to access fresh water. And they built up so much public support that they were able to pass a referendum to block the project before there was further investigation into the environmental impacts. And then they went even further and escalated it to Google Mountain View, where Google Mountain View then had to evaluate, make concessions to the community. And then they escalated to the Chilean government, which has now created this roundtable that brings together community residents and activists, as well as the tech companies, to discuss future data center projects within the country. And so like that kind of spirit, even when there aren't government protections that are protecting these communities from these imperial expansion projects, and even when the government is actually in cahoots with the companies to bring even more of those facilities in, we have seen remarkable mobilizing where the community steps up and they take the leadership and they're able to still gain significant concessions and even block projects completely when it's not within their interest. Basically, anytime a chatbot or an AI system can do anything, it has to be taught by a human. And because chatbots are language technologies, these companies will look to contract cheap English-speaking workers. And because of the history of colonialism, with the UK colonizing places like India or the US colonizing places like the Philippines, those are places where there is a large base of English-speaking workers that can perform the tasks that these tech industry companies want them to do. And so in my book, I highlight this example of the fact that OpenAI contracted an Indian firm to do the content moderation on their models for image generation. So these workers were looking through all of this really horrific AI-generated images to try and figure out which ones should be allowed or not allowed with OpenAI's technologies. And Philippines is also a huge base for other types of data industry work, not just chatbots, where they are doing things like labeling images, or they're trying to train self-driving cars. And like all of these workers work in often extremely exploitative conditions, because the workers are not actually told who they're working for. They often are unclear who the boss even is. Like if there are problems that they're seeing, they don't even know who to flag it to. And they are also paid very, very often very, very little amounts of money. Maybe a couple dollars a day or a couple dollars an hour, depending on where they sit geographically and how much these companies think that they can get away with. And so it is become more and more of a problem as the industry has continued to grow and the labor demand has continued to grow. The China case illustrates something that we have seen for a long time, which is that in resource-constrained environments, there's actually often much more innovative AI work being done. So in my own interactions with researchers from around the world, some of the most exciting research happens with African AI researchers or Latin American AI researchers or Chinese AI researchers, because they're just not operating under the same circumstances of having extraordinary amounts of money or extraordinary amounts of computational resources. They are developing models that aren't just exactly the same as the American models in terms of capabilities, that with just less resources. They're also like looking at fundamentally different types of AI technologies that are centering the problem that they ultimately want to solve with AI. So with African AI researchers that I've spoken to in the past, grid reliability is a huge issue, not just in Africa, but actually around the world. And they have figured out how to use very small specialized AI models to improve grid reliability, such as just simply predicting when a piece of grid equipment is going to fail before it fails, so that they can then swap in newer equipment, upgrade it, and not have any kind of blackout or downtime for that grid. And these are things that the US has really underinvested in, because they're just not pursuing this kind of thinking anymore. I sort of see it as they've become intellectually lazy because of a glut of capital and a glut of resources. So they're not looking at like, how do we actually just solve these like very practical problems that can improve the quality of life and human rights around the world. And so this leads me to my second point, which is that before Silicon Valley really entered the scene with realizing that there was a significant amount of money to be made in the AI industry, AI research was largely a cross-border endeavor. It was understood that if everyone around the world works together to build AI, we will just end up with better systems that improve lives for everyone. And so that is where I see the solution, is that we rewind the narrative of some zero-sum game, like all of these competing models and who's gonna win, who's gonna lose, so on and so forth. We rewind all of that back to the narrative that once reigned, which was that we should actually have cross-border collaboration and the best ideas can come from anywhere in the world and everyone should be taking advantage of them. So first, I think we need to broaden our understanding of what even constitutes AI regulation. I think a lot of people think that regulating AI simply means allowing anyone to build AI however they want and then deciding how to constrain the deployment of that technology into the world. But actually, we also need to constrain how AI is developed in the first place. So the fact that these American companies have just been scraping whatever data they want and hoovering up all of this intellectual property without any hindrance, that is a place that the government should be intervening. They should be interpreting copyright law to strengthen intellectual property protections. The US should please have a federal data privacy law so that there's actual protections from people having their children's photos getting caught up in training these systems that ultimately then, can be used to harm their kids. Data centers need to be regulated. That is also a form of AI regulation, where all governments should be thinking within their own country's context, like what land would they actually allow these companies to build on? How much energy would they actually want these companies to be able to use for this type of technology? How much fresh water would they use? And there might be plenty of actually existing regulations that already apply, like environmental regulations that were originally designed to check other industries and their pollution that actually are extremely relevant for the AI industry as well. And so the question is, like, when you say like who should regulate, the answer is everyone. Every government should be thinking about how to design regulations that help steer the trajectory of AI development so that it ultimately leads to broad public benefit rather than just benefit concentrated within the hands of the wealthy that are running these Silicon Valley companies. And that requires looking at all the full AI development supply chain and also the deployment scenarios. And there will need to be coordination. There will need to be international coordination, of course. We need to use all of the regulatory instruments that are available to us that we already have to also contain the way that the AI industry is currently creating a lot of harm by just passing regulation. I mean, it's never too late to do that because these companies require up-to-date data in order to continue developing their models. They require up-to-date computer chips for training the next generation of their facilities. So we might have missed the boat for the things that already exist now, but that doesn't mean that we cannot regulate everything that's going to exist in the future. And so in order for the companies to continue keeping up with the innovative feel, they need to develop new things. It's not like, suddenly OpenAI can just continue cashing in on a ChatGPT that was generations older. So all of the things that are going to come after, and there will be many, 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 many more AI technologies that come after, it's absolutely not too late for us to actually implement regulation. And in fact, we have a lot of evidence now from the last 3 years of this technology being around of how to actually design those effective regulations for all the technologies moving forward. There's a huge bubble. I am very concerned that it's going to burst in a way that is extremely harmful to the global economy and is going to leave a lot of people around the world devastated. But if there is a bubble pop, journalism is still essential, and community efforts and public education and civil society work is still essential for then figuring out how do we rebuild after the bubble pops. There has, of course, been plenty of work done by people like Naomi Klein who have shown that in crises, in disaster situations, there are two ways we can come out of it. Either authoritarians, fascists, corporate opportunists use that crisis to then make things worse, to then install more surveillance, to then erode more human rights, to then privatize everything. Or in crisis, it becomes a place for the phoenix to rise from the ashes. We are able to build something fundamentally better by going back to what are the real core things that we want to protect as a society that are crucial to human flourishing, and how do we rebuild even better, more resilient institutions, communities, organizations around those core principles. And all of the work that we do now as public defenders, whether you're an activist or an advocate or in nonprofit work or in government work or in journalism work, all of that work is going to help determine which path we take. It did take a long time to unwind colonialism, but it happened. And it happened at a time when there wasn't really a broad understanding of democracy and this global belief in fortifying human agency and human rights and making sure that people have the freedom to choose how they self-govern and what kind of future they ultimately want to live in. So we are at a much better place now where we actually know those things, and we know those things to be possible, and people are willing to fight for them because they already have tasted that. And so that one thing that I see is like the immune system response that's been happening to these new empires has happened much, much faster than in the past. And we know for a fact that throughout history, empires have fallen, and this time it will be no different.